Please be seated. Proceedings are resumed. Thank you for your indulgence for the break for consultation. I'll recognize the Honorable Premier.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we are in the home stretch now with respect to the debate on the budget address, the throne speech, and the policy statement which I delivered on behalf of the government. The Minister of Finance has just wound up the debate with respect to the budget address and responded, I believe, quite ably to matters with respect to the budget which have been raised by members of the House, particular members of on the other side of the House. And so it is my duty, Madam Speaker, as Premier and as the one who delivered the government's policy statement, to now wind up the debate with respect to the throne speech and the policy statement. Madam Speaker, I have listened with much interest and even some amusement at times over the course of the past few days to my colleagues on both sides of this House as they have responded to the throne speech, the budget address, and the policy statement. And it is always good that when we can put aside our political differences and come to this House and do the will of the people and ensure the continued stability and progress of these beloved Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, in the course of these proceedings, members also had the benefit of the report of the Progressive-led administration for its first year, entitled On Course, and some members did refer to it in the course of their debate. Madam Speaker, as the 35th President of the United States of America, John F. Kennedy, once said, "We don't see the end of the tunnel, but I must say I don't think it is darker than it was a year ago, and in some ways I believe it is lighter." We made much headway in the past year, and we are forging ahead with major projects, some of which are already on the way or will begin soon. I must say I wholeheartedly agree with what the Leader of the Opposition said when he rose to make his contribution, and if I have recorded him correctly, he said, "We don't need fussing and fighting and the building of roadblocks for the country. We need solutions, progress, and understanding." I couldn't agree with him more. And I believe, Madam Speaker, that this government, the Progressive-led government, has brought and continues to bring this type of approach to our management of the country and indeed to the way we operate within the confines of this chamber. Only by working together and having frank, honest, and good debate can we maintain the reputation of the Cayman Islands and continue to attract investment, because, Madam Speaker, of the confidence that has now been restored to government and to these islands. Madam Speaker, we are blessed to be in a democracy and a country where free speech is lauded. There's no shortage of that these days, Madam Speaker. But I mention it because today marks two major milestones in the history of the world. 25 years ago today, Poland held elections that heralded the collapse of communism in that country, creating a democratic society. Also 25 years ago today, the People's Army put down China's incipient protest movement with shocking brutality. Today in Poland, on this anniversary, is celebrated where they have come with pomp and circumstance. But today in China, memorials and celebrations were forbidden. Many of us remember those two history-making events, but I often wonder if we really remember the fights of others for democracy when we have an opportunity to go to the polls in Cayman, and when we have the opportunity, as we do, to speak freely and openly about whatever concerns us in this country. Madam Speaker, as I said at the beginning, I listened to some of the contributions of the other members with amusement, including the Leader of the Opposition alluding to the fact that many of the projects we are pushing through were ideas born of his government. Madam Speaker, I am man enough to give him his due. But the difference is that the Progressives-led administration is actually getting things done. We are not looking for backdoor deals to push through work at our seaport and at the airports. All of our projects, from the two just mentioned to the landfill, will be done under the guidance of the Framework for Fiscal Responsibility. It's because, Madam Speaker, of the FFR that we, as the member for Northside suggested, can't, quote, just get on with it, unquote, with important projects like waste management. We made a promise to the people of this country to uphold the Public Management and Finance Law and the FFR, so there could be no doubt that everything is being done above board in finding private sector partners to get the airports revamped, the cruise berthing piers built, and our waste management issues resolved once and for all. It can only help us maintain the confidence we've been able to rebuild if we follow the law. I again have to agree with the member for Northside when he said that the FFR is no more than common sense. It is unfortunate, Madam Speaker, that the last administration did not appear to use any common sense in their management of these proposed projects. Madam Speaker, where I do take issue on this point with the member for Northside is when he complained in his contribution that he left behind a 10-year waste management implementation policy in 1992. Madam Speaker, that was the year my first son was born. He's 22 now. When he was, the member said, and again I quote him, kicked out of government. Madam Speaker, like me, you're old enough to remember that 1992 was the year that the membership in the Legislative Assembly was increased from 12 to 15. Time marches on. And now we have provision for 18 elected members of the LA under the present Constitution. And we also have burgeoning landfills that can't be fixed with a waste management policy developed more than 22 years ago, when there were only about 27,000 people living in the Cayman Islands. We've more than doubled the population since then. Also, Madam Speaker, technology and best practices have changed, and I can't really believe that the member from Northside is seriously suggesting that we use his ancient study to fix our growing landfill problems. As I said, Madam Speaker, time marches on, and we need to find feasible, modern ways to address waste management on all three islands, not tired rhetoric about past efforts made in political office that were unsuccessful. And Madam Speaker, for those like the Honourable Leader of the Opposition who say the dump plan costs too much and doesn't make sense, we beg to differ. At least we are seeking to address the problem. The approach adopted by his administration cost the country millions of dollars and delivered nothing. Madam Speaker, we will be successful in coming up with a viable solution for waste management in these islands, but we will do it in an open, honest, and transparent way with the goal of having the an integrated solid waste management system in place in 2016. This is an old chestnut, but the progressive-led administration has the political will to find a solution. In fact, Madam Speaker, if I am not mistaken, the RFP went out this week for the consultants who will prepare a national waste management strategy and outline business case. Those tenders are due on the 16th of July this year, so I believe we're making good headway. And speaking of modern solutions, that's what we will do with the cruise berthing piers in the harbor in Georgetown. The member of Northside, or from Northside, would have the country believe that if we pretty up the cruise terminal with some trees and concrete buckets, our cruise visitors will be happy and continue to come with no complaints. It is that sort of simplistic approach, Madam Speaker, that has delivered us where we are now at crisis. I won't spend time in my reply here repeating what the Deputy Premier and Minister of Tourism said in his speech on Monday night, but I will happily remind everyone that efforts have been made to make the visitor, have already been made to make the visitor experience more enjoyable, but that isn't enough. We have to address the issue substantively. We have to address the concerns about capacity and about the overall ability of not just the cruise berthing when it is built, but of Georgetown itself and the island as a whole to cope with the increased projected numbers of visitors. We have heard it year after year after year from successive governments. We need cruise berthing to remain competitive. This, Madam Speaker, is another project that we have the political will to get done. And we're going to get it done, as the Minister for Tourism said, with determination, integrity, and resolve. And that, Madam Speaker, has been and will continue to be the way that we address all issues facing this government. Indeed, Madam Speaker, I would hope that every member in this House would approach their role with those same three traits: determination, integrity, and resolve. And so, Madam Speaker, I was most disheartened to hear a member on the other side abuse, in my view, abuse his privilege of position and place on Friday afternoon. The member from East End chose this forum to air his family's laundry, blaming the civil service for the inability of his nephew to get a job piloting the police helicopter. In addressing this matter in this manner, in this House, Madam Speaker, in my view, the member did a disservice to his nephew, to the civil service, and to this House. I should tell you, Madam Speaker, that in the almost 14 years I have been here, I have never heard any member of this House so openly and blatantly use their position as an elected member to seek to further the interests of their family. It is an abuse, in my view, it's an abuse of the office, and one that ought not to be condoned by this House. And Madam Speaker, if the standards in public life legislation were in effect, I do believe the member would fall foul of those provisions. Madam Speaker, the member said on the floor of this House that his nephew, because he's a Caymanian, is entitled to a job. And he's right, if the nephew has the right qualifications for the job he's seeking, which in this case, Madam Speaker, unfortunately, he does not. The published job description requires pilots for the police helicopter to have a minimum of 1,000 hours of multi-engine turbine flying. This young man has less than 200. For the member to say that government didn't offer any assistance is simply, Madam Speaker, an untruth. And in a moment, I shall read a memorandum sent to me and the Deputy Governor by the Chief Officer, which has outlined the measures which government has taken and the steps that have been tried to assist this young man. Madam Speaker, with your permission, I wish to read into the record a memorandum addressed to myself as Premier and copied to the Deputy Governor from the Chief Officer and the Minister of Home Affairs, dated June 3rd.
Please proceed.
Subject, Darren McLean. I am aware that MLA Arden McLean has publicly voiced his discontent and condemnation of Darren McLean, who is MLA McLean's nephew, not being hired as a helicopter pilot in the Air Support Unit of the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. To date, Mr. McLean has met with several individuals from the Ministry of Home Affairs, that's Mr. Darren McLean, and the RCIPS to discuss the requirements of the position and where his current experience and training levels are at, as well as the possibilities and opportunities that may be available which could assist him in accomplishing his ultimate goal of becoming a helicopter pilot with the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. In accordance with the job description for the helicopter pilot, the following are mandatory requirements for the post holder to have: possession of a current commercial pilot license, minimum of 200 hours night flying experience, minimum of 1,000 hours of multi-engine turbine flying, experience in flying over water during day and night missions, and 50 hours on type EC-135, which is the particular model of helicopter which the RCIPS are currently utilizing. According to Mr. D. McLean's resume as of September 2013, he has the following qualifications: commercial rotorcraft helicopter license, instrument rated, 162.2 total helicopter hours, 156.7 hours on the S300 CBI stroke R22 craft, and 5.5 hours on the Bell 20683 craft. To the best of my knowledge, below is a timeline of meetings which have taken place to date that were set by the Ministry or RCIPS officials to assist Mr. D. McLean. February 2012, note, Madam Speaker, this is before we took office. Mr. D. McLean was contacted by Air Operations Unit Executive Officer Mr. Steve Fitzgerald to visit the Air Operations Unit. Mr. McLean met with Dave Knight, Chief Pilot, who shared valuable information about the unit and occupation of being a pilot in the RCIPS, and gave a visit of the unit. December 12, 2012, Mr. D. McLean met with the Commissioner of Police. Matters discussed included an overview of Mr. McLean's pilot training and associated experience, suggested that experience, that is accumulation of flying hours, be logged vis-a-vis military, logging, and power lines, offered access to and mentoring from our helicopters pilots, and employment within the RCIPS Air Support Unit was not offered to Mr. McLean at any time during the meeting. September 30th, 2013, Mr. D. McLean was contacted by Air Operations Unit Executive Officer Mr. Steve Fitzgerald via email as a follow-up to confirm the status of his progress. Madam Speaker, I should interject here that on the 9th of August, I met with Mr. Darren McLean's father, Dervin Buster McLean, to discuss these matters, and I actually raised the issue again with my chief officer, which probably is responsible for the September 30th, 2013 contact. October 4th, 2013, a meeting at the Air Operations Unit with Mr. Fitzgerald to discuss Mr. McLean's progress and possible options moving forward. October 8th, 2013, meeting with Mr. D. McLean and me, this is the chief officer, with his father, This meeting was agreed again to show support of Mr. McLean's desires as well as to further explain the reason for the qualifications and experience required to be a pilot with the RCIPS Air Support Unit. October 16, 2013, at my request, that is the Chief Officer's request, helicopter company contacts were provided to me by Mr. Fitzgerald to further share with Mr. Darren McLean as possibilities to seek employment to get the required flight hours. November 7th, 2013, I, being the Chief Officer, hosted a further meeting with Mr. Darren McLean in which I invited my Chief Human Resources Manager, Mrs. Brianna Ebanks. In addition to this, I provided letters of support for Mr. McLean which were addressed to the companies earlier identified by Mr. Steve Fitzgerald. November 8th, 2013, meeting with Chief Human Resources Manager, Minister of Home Affairs. During this meeting, Mr. Darren McLean's resume was reviewed and updated, and a letter of reference was provided from me, being the Chief Officer. November 26, 2013, the Deputy Governor was contacted by the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, seeking any assistance the Cayman Islands government could offer Mr. Darren McLean to get additional training. November 27, 2013, the Deputy Governor contacted Mr. Gary Benham of the Governor's Office to assist with the Minister's request. That is the Minister of Finance. November 28, 2013, Mr. Benham contacted the British High Commission seeking information and investigating opportunities for Mr. Darren McLean to apply to join the British military as a trained pilot. December 3, 2013, responses from the Air Staff and IPP and MOD. I'm not sure what MOD means. Minister of Defense. An assistant to the Defense Advisor Caribbean, British High Commission were given to Mr. Benham. Quoting from that response, in summary, there are lots of complications to overcome which will be expensive and then won't guarantee him a place at the military flying school, even if he were to achieve the standard required. There is also the problem of the UK residency requirement to join the UK Armed Forces, which I doubt will be flexed in order for him to join. I would suggest that the Cayman Islands government pursue this case through commercial training rather than through the military, unquote. December 4th, 2013, Mr. Benham emailed the Deputy Governor and provided him with the email chain of responses received. There were suggestions for commercial training to be offered rather than military, given the limited experience Mr. Darren McLean has. It was also suggested that Mr. McLean apply for an internship employment to build his experience. Mr. Fitzgerald has offered Mr. Darren McLean the opportunity to visit the unit and fly with the crew on operational missions as an observer, both day and night. To date, he has not taken up that opportunity. There has been no further contact from Mr. Darren McLean between Mr. Fitzgerald and any of the pilots to date. I feel that my ministry, this is the Chief Officer speaking, and the RCIPS has done all we can and more to assist Mr. Darren McLean. I understand that he has been given a scholarship by the Cayman Islands government and has successfully completed his commercial pilot's license. However, I cannot justify hiring him with his current qualifications. As stated above, the published job description requires a pilot to have a minimum of 1,000 hours of multi-engine turbine flying. Mr. Darren McLean currently has around 200. Until Mr. Darren McLean obtains the prerequisite hours of flight time, we will not be able to consider his request for employment as a pilot in the ASU of the RCIPS. Should you have any further questions or need additional information, please do not hesitate to contact me. Now, Madam Speaker, the last thing that I wanted to have to do was to...
Honourable Premier, before you go on, do you have a copy available for the chair, please?
Madam Speaker, I can have a copy made. I think this is the only copy I have here, but I'm quite happy for you to have sight of this and we can copy it in due course.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker, the last thing I wish to have to do was to deal with this matter on the floor of the House. The young man is a great asset to his family and to this country. He has a tremendous amount of ambition. He's a very good boy. He's the same age as my son. of my eldest son. They were born the same year. But it is his uncle, and to an extent his father, who has made this a public issue. And his father has raised it on the floor of this house and has made it the allegation.
His uncle. His uncle has raised it, not his father.
His father has raised it
on the floor of this house.
Oh, yeah. No, his father didn't raise it on the floor of this house. His father raised it on the talk shows. His uncle raised it on the floor of this house. Thank you for correcting me, Madam Speaker. And has I was going to say implied, but has alleged that it is myself and other members of the government and members of the civil service who are part of some conspiracy to keep this young man from being able to achieve his lifelong dream to be a helicopter pilot. Madam Speaker, nothing could be further from the truth. And I know in his heart of hearts, because I know him very, very, very well, the member from East End knows that that would not be something that would ever cross my mind. In fact, the opposite would be the case. He knows my advocacy for young people and opportunities in this country. He was part of my party. He was part of my administration, or I should say administration of which I was also a part for years. But what he did on Friday was wrong by any measure. And I have a duty to make the country aware of what I have done, what this public service has done, and what ministers in my government have done as part of the efforts to give young Darren McLean an opportunity. Madam Speaker, I am prepared to say even now that if it is possible for us to assist Darren with training, but in any way, the measures that we have tried so far haven't resulted in what we need. But if it requires financial assistance, that is something that my government will certainly look at favorably to see how we can help. We in no way wish to penalize this young man. In fact, we want to help him as we want to help every other person, and particularly every other young person in Cayman who has ambition and drive to become something and to achieve something and to have a good job and a sense of self-worth and esteem in this country. But I was duty-bound to make the country aware of what the government, even before we took office, has actually done in trying to assist. Not the story at all that has been told by the member from East End, or indeed by his father on the talk show. Madam Speaker, enough about that. Madam Speaker, I want to get back to the responses of members of this House with respect to a range of things. I listened closely to the Leader of the Opposition, and I have to say that his claim that all that we have done is to simply wrap up all of his projects, all the projects his administration actually started, all the initiatives that they began, wrap them up in a big red bow, or paint them red, as he said, and call them ours. And that, of course, he supports these initiatives. I take that, Madam Speaker, as a backhanded compliment, because to have the Leader of the Opposition, whom I have known for so long, find himself unable to actually criticize anything of consequence in the budget, I think is a huge compliment to the budget that this government has been able to present. Madam Speaker, I listened carefully to his discussion about the building up of Singapore, and I've heard him walk down this road more than once. And I often shake my head because Singapore is a country of 5.3 million people, consists of some 63 islands. And the parallels I find difficult sometimes to grasp. I was particularly curious to understand the significance of his observation that the Premier of Singapore earns $3 million a year. I don't think he was suggesting that that's what they should pay me, but I couldn't follow I couldn't follow the relevance of that. Madam Speaker, on more than one occasion during his contribution, the Leader of the Opposition said that immigration has to be changed, that the population has to grow. He wants to import jobs so as to give Caymanians work, which is commendable. But I suppose where we differ, Madam Speaker, is that we don't just want to import jobs to give Caymanians work. We want our Caymanians to be able to take on some of the top positions that we hope the job creation will actually bring to offer. Madam Speaker, I keep saying this, but the Leader of the Opposition has been around for 30 plus years. He has been leader of government business twice, and Premier once. And indeed, the basis of the current immigration policy was established by his administration. And so I'm always left shaking my head quite a bit when he complains so bitterly about the present immigration regime. Madam Speaker, I believe that we have in place a pretty good immigration policy. I do agree with some of the observations of the Leader of the Opposition, though, that we have to be careful about how insular and restrictive we are with respect to immigration. There is, particularly in tough times like this, a tendency to want more enforcement, to want to force companies to employ Caymanians, and to say that we're not going to allow more work permits. Madam Speaker, I've been around this business for a long time. I spent a lot of time working on it, thinking about it, observing it. And I have concluded that we will never, ever, through enforcement or otherwise, compel companies to hire people that they do not want to hire. The Cayman Islands government would never be able to afford the level of resources necessary to have that kind of enforcement regime. For 40 plus years, we have striven to drive employer behavior by virtue of penalties. If you don't hire this Caymanian, you're not going to get a work permit, or we're going to prosecute you, those sorts of things. Madam Speaker, I'm not suggesting that we remove those provisions from the law, but what I have concluded myself, and some of my colleagues share my view, is that we have to develop an accreditation scheme, which has been talked about before, which incentivizes employers to hire Caymanians and to train Caymanians. We are not going to succeed by trying to force them to do it by threat, intimidation, legislation, prosecution. It hasn't worked for 40 years. In my view, it's never going to work. And one of the initiatives which we hope to get underway during the course of this year is one that will give life and function to an accreditation scheme. A lot of the hard work on that has already been done. It was done during the years when the PPM was first in office, from 2005 to 2009. And we have dug out that work and that research, and we are looking at how that can be included in proposed new amendments to the immigration law over the course of this fiscal year. Madam Speaker, again, giving credit where it is due, I would like to publicly thank the Leader of the Opposition for working with Mr. Gene Thompson and Dr. Devichetti and getting the ball rolling on the Health City project, which is now operational. Madam Speaker, despite disparaging comments from the member from Northside, who I believe is using what I regard as spurious numbers gathered by the spies in his self-proclaimed Ezard Intelligence Unit to make some kind of point. I am happy to say that the hospital is open and is indeed doing medical miracles. Just this week, doctors at Health City completed their first specialized heart procedures on a patient from Trinidad and Tobago. These highly specialized procedures would normally require a trip to the US and is the first of its kind to be performed in the Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, Health City is one of the few facilities within the region where this procedure can be conducted. In fact, for every 10 to 15 cardiac centers in the world, only one center will perform this procedure, a testament to the high level of expertise found at Health City, Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, the member from Northside, again in his contribution, he said this many times over the years, has spoken about what he considers to be the compromised standards of admission, or I should say registration, of doctors at Health City, because the law was changed to accommodate the Indian certification. But Madam Speaker, that is not the reality. It is not the perception that we have. And indeed, I believe over the course of the next little while, we will become very, very proud of what Health City is able to do and the reputation that it is going to garner for itself, the doctors and nurses and staff who work there, and importantly, for these Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, it is, because it's here in Cayman, it is ideal for neighboring Caribbean islands. Patients are now able to shorten their travel time for tertiary care and avoid the high cost of travel and the visa requirements for equivalent care within the US or elsewhere. In addition to groundbreaking procedures, Madam Speaker, Health City is also bringing in jobs, and the spin-off of employees living in the districts of East End and Northside is good for the shops and restaurants in those districts. Just as the new hospital has meant jobs for our people, once our projects get going, they too will create employment opportunities for Caymanians. Madam Speaker, we are a year into this term, and I've listened to the talk shows, I've read the paper, I follow things, I listen to the debate in this House. And with respect to the contributions of the member from Northside and the member from East End, I just have this observation to make. I have struggled, Madam Speaker, to find one occasion over the course of the past year when either member have agreed with anything that the government has done, has applauded anything that the government has done anything but criticize anything that the government has done. Madam Speaker, even a stopped clock is right twice a day. It could never be that everything that the government does is bad or wrong. And then, Madam Speaker, both of them, and they use the same language because they no doubt sit and consider how they are going to approach these things. They both use the exact same word in their speeches. that East End is embargoed by this government, North Side is embargoed by this government. Madam Speaker, the biggest obstacle to getting anything done in the districts of East End and North Side, in my respectful view, are the two representatives from those districts, because they stand in the way of everything that the government proposes. They complain, they criticize. Nothing that is proposed is good or right or proper for the districts. If you talk about putting in an extension of the East-West Arterial, that is met with complaint and concern. Nothing that you do, nothing that you propose is right. Health City is put in there. Health City is a bad thing. Not the member for East End, he didn't say that, but the member for North Side consistently takes that view. So, Madam Speaker, it is very difficult for the government to move things forward in the face of constant obstacles, hurdles, criticism at every single turn. So, Madam Speaker, if the members from East End and North Side truly want to represent the interests of their constituents and to help the government do its very best for those districts, I would suggest, I would hope, I would pray that instead of going on the talk show twice a week and banging the government to death, that they spend a little time talking to the ministers and members responsible about how we can actually assist in developing and improving the situation within their respective districts. Madam Speaker, my roots are in East End. I have a deep and undying love and passion, particularly for that district, because that is from whence I come, generations and generations. I still have a farm in the district of East End. My father still has many acres of land there. I spend a lot of time there. So, no, neither of them need come with this, with this idea to try to convince people that somehow the government, or myself in particular, are opposed to opportunities being created, better life being created for the people of those two districts. Madam Speaker, before I move on to talk a little bit about the police and so forth, I want to say a few words about the arrangement, the deal, the discussions with the DART group. Madam Speaker, I think the last public statement that I made with respect to this was that there had been no progress with respect to the negotiations which we have been having with the DART group about the two agreements, essentially, which had been entered into by the previous administration with respect to a whole range of things, but in particular with respect to the continued development of the hotel, the one that is under construction, the Kimpton Hotel, the closure of the West Bay Road, the continued development of the public beach, and so forth. Madam Speaker, we have been careful in our public utterances with respect to this because we believe that the DART group is a major and important player in Cayman's economy. They have invested hundreds of millions of dollars here. They have given every indication that they wish to invest more, and we want to do everything we can to partner with them in the continued development of Cayman and opportunities for Caymanians. Madam Speaker, we had, I believe, not myself, but other members of my team had some 9 meetings with the DART group over the course of the past year. But until recently, I believe we'd made very little in terms of progress. I'm not going to go into the details of what the stumbling blocks were, but I think the country is generally aware that the position that we took with respect to the agreements that had been made with the previous administration were that we thought there were aspects of those that needed to be renegotiated. And we needed to come to terms which we believe the people of this country would find more acceptable, more reasonable than those original agreements. Madam Speaker, what I want to say today is that in more recent times, I have myself met with the managing director of the DART group, that I believe we have made significant, the chief executive officer is called. I think we've made significant progress, that we have a better understanding and appreciation of what both sides require, and that I have yesterday was in receipt of what I think is a very helpful letter, and I am quite optimistic that over the course of the next few weeks we should be able to come, hopefully, to terms. It is important that we do so. It is not good that we have a range of things that are left hanging with respect to the previous agreements, and we certainly want to encourage the DART group to continue their investment in Cayman. The economy has turned, but it is still far from operating at the pace that we all would like, to make sure that we get everybody back to work. And the more economic activity, the more development that we have going, the better the chances that by this time next year, we won't be talking about unemployment in the way that we've had to over the course of these past 6 years. So, Madam Speaker, as I said, I won't go into any of the detail, and I know I'm taking something of a risk that it may all fall apart in the end again, but in the same way that I said in the past that there was no progress when I believe there is progress, I feel it is important and only fair that I indicate that as well. Madam Speaker, I just want to turn briefly now to talk about the proposed budget for the Ministry of Home and Community Affairs. Madam Speaker, the total operating budget for Community Affairs in the upcoming year, including its department, units, and government-owned company, the Keys Foundation, is about $14 million, which represents less than $100,000 increase over the previous year. Madam Speaker, in addition to that, though, there's about $19 million made up of what I call transfer payments and money paid to non-government organizations. For those who would wonder what transfer payments relate to, they relate to payments to the seamen's and veterans' pensions and so forth, and money given to the Keys Foundation, and money used for school lunches, for the Pines, and so forth. Madam Speaker, it is important to this government that we continually strive to improve the quality of life for all persons in these islands. Accordingly, the work of Community Affairs helps us achieve this outcome by ensuring that human development remains at the forefront of this country's national agenda. It is the mission of the Ministry of Community Affairs to empower children and families by adopting a holistic approach to address human needs, supported by innovative legislation, policies, services, and programs which focus on positive social development. Ultimately, the goal is to have a stable, safe, prosperous, and healthy community in which there is equal access to opportunities and support networks in place to help those most vulnerable. Madam Speaker, such a community takes care of all of its members, especially children, the elderly, the vulnerable, and persons with disabilities. Madam Speaker, there are tremendous complexities involved in providing quality human services to people in an ever-changing environment. Part of this complexity stems from the challenge of balancing the overwhelming amount of need with the very limited resources that we have. As all honorable ministers and members of this House are aware, we find ourselves in a time when many are struggling to meet their basic needs, thereby increasing demands and strain on the services and programs provided by the Ministry of Community Affairs. We know that large and growing sums of public funds are being spent on helping the relatively poor to make ends meet. These are persons who are not absolutely poor, but in these times need a hand up to make it. We're also spending on the care and protection and correction of young persons whose life paths are at risk. We also know that the growth in these expenses outstrips the growth in our revenue base. Madam Speaker, the projected growth in these social patterns suggests a picture of a society that will become less and less pleasant to live in, with higher percentages of persons in poverty, growing numbers of delinquent or disaffected youth, and stressed out, chronically ill adults with associated disabilities, dependencies, and dysfunctions that come with such conditions. In terms of a response to these challenges, we also know these facts. We cannot continue our old Band-Aid approach, such as throwing a little more money at poor relief or injecting more cash into health care. We have to get at the root causes of these situations, work right across government, and join our partners in civil institutions to really turn this around. This means lots of rethinking and retooling. We must begin to see each of our areas of work through the lens of what the whole human being requires. In other words, we must address human needs in a holistic way. As a result, in the 2014-2015 financial year, the focus of community affairs will be to restructure and reorganize the way human services are delivered in order to realize greater efficiencies and maximize existing resources. In all the agencies that fall under my direct responsibility, namely the Department of Children and Family Services, the Needs Assessment Unit, the Department of Counseling Services, and the Children and Youth Services Foundation. Madam Speaker, the Ministry, in partnership with the Department of Children and Family Services, will focus on enhancing the provision of its clinical services to the people of the Cayman Islands through the Adult Special Needs Program, foster care and adoption services, and ensure that any necessary intervention in a child's life is done so in their best interest and in accordance with the principles of the Children's Law. Madam Speaker, as briefly mentioned before, it is evident that between the population of unemployed persons and those with an inadequate income, the demand for financial assistance from the Cayman Islands government in order to meet basic needs has increased significantly due to the economic downturn over the past few years. Hence, we need to improve the financial assistance system and to develop policies to better address and provide for the needs of the community. The Needs Assessment Unit, therefore, is a new unit stemming from one of the efficiency recommendations of the Department of Children and Family Services Public Service Review conducted in 2010. The mission of the Needs Assessment Unit is to provide a centralized delivery of financial assistance services to assist persons in meeting their basic human needs. A significant amount of persons seeking financial assistance are mothers with dependent children, elderly or disabled persons who are chronically or terminally ill and unable to work to maintain themselves, as well as persons who have become unemployed and are unable to locate employment for various reasons. The separation of financial assistance from the Department of Children and Family Services and the establishment of the Needs Assessment Unit commenced in March 2013, and its first budget was approved last year at the end of October. Since that time, the Ministry, along with the Departments of Children and Family Services and Counseling Services, has been working along with the unit to further enhance its policies and procedures to meet the needs of its clients. The Department of Counseling Services will work to expand their family programs to reach more parents in the Cayman Islands in order to assist them to develop positive and effective parenting skills that reduce risk factors and increase protective factors within their families. There will also be continued enhancement of family therapy services to broaden the range of services available to those in our community who are struggling with issues such as trauma, grief, depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. As a government-owned company, the Keys Foundation, Keys stands for Children and Youth Services. Madam Speaker, the Keys Foundation will continue to provide the government with programs and services that focus on therapeutic interventions with children who require care and protection or are engaged in offending behavior. Madam Speaker, turning to the Minister of Home Affairs, I should say that the operational budget for this year is about $92 million, which is a $3 million increase over last year's budget. And this supplements and reaffirms this government's commitment to public safety and our country's national security. Madam Speaker, almost all of that $3 million increase goes to salaries, personnel costs, because as I've indicated before, we have serious issues on the front line with respect to the full range of our uniformed services. At the Cayman Islands Fire Service this past year, we requested and facilitated a review of the fire services by the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor for England, equipped airport rescue launches with life-saving rafts in Grand Cayman, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, and completed the upgrade of the air conditioning system at the West Bay Station, and we've now commenced tender for a new system for the Georgetown Police Station, Fire Station. The Minister also conducted fire extinguisher training for 230 people, performed annual inspections for liquor licensing premises, hotel inspections and commercial buildings, and sent 5 officers to the USA for training in fire prevention. 1 person was sent to the UK for command and control aerodrome training. Madam Speaker, turning to the London office, I think most people know of the issues that we've had there. But what I can say in the positive is that we have advertised for a director for the London office. The applications are all in. We have a short list of 4 applicants, all of whom are Caymanian, and the interviews are being scheduled presently. So we hope to have someone in post in a relatively short time. Madam Speaker, with respect to the Department of Community Rehabilitation, that department has delivered more than 2,000 formal professional reports assessments to the courts over the past year to help guide judges and magistrates in appropriate sentencing and other matters. The Ministry has delivered community-based supervision and intervention for 1 person with mental health illness who is in the criminal justice system, a range of domestic violence services, victim services, and drug court services. Madam Speaker, with respect to the Department of Computer Services, I can report that this department has delivered upgrades and system functionality improvements to the General Registry, including upgraded software application to support all aspects of the new exempted limited partnerships law and e-services systems to implement electronic data exchange. The department also upgraded online company registry systems to make certificates available as e-certificates that are emailed directly to clients. Integrated software is now available for the processing of tobacco licensing with receipting, workflow, document management, and board processing, along with an integrated module for the processing of the Special Economic Zone trade certificates. The system functionality required to support the new Immigration Law 2013 has been redesigned and built, including work permit administrators with increased powers and the new permanent residency point system, inclusive online self-points assessment tool. At Customs, the department has come up with a scanning solution Customs officers are now able to scan crew and passenger declaration cards at the airport. Documents are tagged with the flight numbers and dates are stored in the ECM system, allowing easy retrieval for enforcement officers. To help ensure Caymanians are aware of and can apply for available jobs, Computer Services delivered the National Workforce Development Agency's online job placement system, which provides an efficient way for employers to communicate efforts to hire a suitable Caymanian and an effective way for the NWDA to provide information to the Immigration Department and its boards that will allow for informed decisions to be made in the work permit process. The Department of Immigration was a key participant in the immigration law revision in 2013. The department met with stakeholders, offered technical advice, and implemented processes and systems to meet the demand and changes that came with the implementation of the new law. Madam Speaker, as I said in my policy statement, in the past year, changes in the way airline passenger data is provided to immigration officials has meant that 65% of outbound passengers no longer have to be physically processed by an immigration officer and can pass directly into the departure lounge after the security controls. Madam Speaker, as a government, as a country really, we continue to experience significant challenges with high numbers of Cuban migrants. Since January 2013, some 141 migrants have landed illegally in the islands. The detention and repatriation of these migrants places significant financial and logistical burden on government, and to date 98 have been repatriated and another 43 remain at the Immigration Detention Center. Madam Speaker, we had hoped to go this month to Cuba to sit down with the authorities there and see if we can improve the process. But for a range of reasons, that has had to be postponed and will not occur now until September. Madam Speaker, interdepartmental cooperation and planning under the Ministry of Home Affairs has led to a common software platform for public safety, law enforcement, and community rehabilitation, a records management system, jail management system, and computer-aided dispatch system from a company called SunGuard Public Sector is now shared by the RCIPS, the Department of Public Safety Communications, Her Majesty's Prison Service, Department of Immigration Enforcement, and the Department of Community Rehabilitation. This initiative is a new benchmark of sharing information between these departments and will lead to more rapid and efficient suspect identification, arrest, conviction, incarceration, and ultimately will facilitate the successful rehabilitation, release, and integration back into the Cayman society. Madam Speaker, we all know that we have entered a new hurricane season, and at the heart of all we do during this time of year is hazard management, Cayman Islands. It has integrated the maintenance and provision of the two-way government radio network into the department. As a service primary for first responders, the network is critical to HMCI. In cooperation with the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, HMCI has trained and certified a new group of 27 mass casualty responders and incident commanders. This training sought to build interagency coordination and response capabilities to manage complex incidents and disasters. In association with the Red Cross and the Fire Department, HMCI has certified a new community emergency response team in West Bay, which is 33 members strong. HMCI also delivered public awareness sessions at schools and other public gatherings to increase disaster awareness and preparedness throughout all age groups and demographics in the Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, the Cayman Islands is now a participant in the Regional Tsunami Warning Network Program. A sensor for the Caribbean Tsunami Warning Program has been installed in Georgetown Harbor, which will provide valuable data on sea levels to assist in the warning mechanism for the Caribbean and the Cayman Islands. The sensor was funded through a UNESCO grant and installed by the German company OTT. The high-precision sensors work by continually monitoring sea level. Data is sent via satellite to the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center in Hawaii and other international scientific institutes. If an unusual rise or fall in sea level is detected, especially after an earthquake event, scientists analyze regional data and decide whether a tsunami warning should be issued to islands and countries that could potentially be impacted by the tsunami wave. We joined other countries in the Caribbean as a participant in a tsunami response exercise in March. Madam Speaker, HMCI has also secured additional specialized equipment for the urban search and rescue team to boost its response capability. HMCI conducted emergency management training for first responders to build the country's capacity to respond to major disasters. Madam Speaker, over at the prison service, we have introduced a release on temporary license scheme. Making our communities safer is not just about holding prisoners securely, but releasing them to lead law-abiding lives once they've served their term. To that end, the prison service has introduced a risk-based temporary license scheme so that those coming to the end of their sentence and whose risk has been lowered will be able to go out on their release to work and link with outside agencies prior to their eventual discharge. There are currently 2 prisoners on the scheme, and this will be expanded during the coming fiscal year. Every prisoner in Northwood and Fairbanks has had their category of risk reviewed to ensure that it is correct and that they are held in the most appropriate accommodation and given the responsibility that their category demands. Madam Speaker, the limited capital funding available has been utilized to bolster the security of the physical infrastructure of the prison, including upgrades to fencing, installation of additional cameras and lighting. Because of the problems with Cuban migrants, the prison has recently been given the responsibility for the management and oversight of the Immigration Detention Center. Mrs. Natalie Lavis, a former prison governor and past member of the Business Development Unit for the National Offender Management Service in the UK, has been employed by the Ministry of Home Affairs to provide management support and assist with the transformation of the prison service. She has been instrumental in all of these initiatives and will assist the prison director with the developments of the IDC. Madam Speaker, as you are probably aware, the Ministry of Home Affairs has oversight of the National Drug Council, which has been busy implementing prevention programming in the primary schools, drug and alcohol education programs in the prisons for males and females. The Council has also reintroduced youth-to-youth programming into the schools following a hiatus Pardon me, Madam Speaker. The Council has also reintroduced youth-to-youth programming into the schools following a hiatus for several years and collected data to develop and support the Cayman National Drug Information Network. The Council has provided feedback to the liquor license law review process. It has begun conducting an evaluation of programs aimed at preventing and supporting persons affected by drugs and alcohol in our communities, and conducted and reported on the Cayman Islands Student Drug Use Survey 2014 and Her Majesty's Prison Survey 2013. Madam Speaker, the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service now has a new cell complex on island which is undergoing construction. It will meet all our expectations and be human rights compliant, as well as improving the effectiveness of police investigations due to the ability to separate and prevent co-accused from concocting their stories before they are interviewed. In addition, the progression in recruitment of a Caymanian-only police recruit class, the first in over 30 years, has demonstrated the commitment to secure local talent and increase the percentage of Caymanians in the service. The class of 13 started in March 2014. At the senior end, RCIPS secured a position on the UK Senior Command course to ensure development at the highest level of police training for a Caymanian candidate, which is critical for the development of officers who seek to attain commissioner-grade positions. Madam Speaker, modernization of the police fleet is continuing, ensuring that ineffective and increasingly expensive to repair vehicles are being removed from the fleet and replaced with a lease hire program that will cut costs both in maintenance terms but also will exploit the modern fuel economies to reduce fuel costs. The cold case file task force has been making headway with the conviction and guilty verdict via jury in the cold case review in respect of the conviction of a murderer from a 2008 case as one example. The anti-corruption team of investigators has been active with the conviction of a senior public official on various fraud offenses, and several Royal Cayman Islands Police Service employees were awarded the Deputy Governor Awards over the course of the past year, demonstrating the high caliber of staff at the RCIPS. Madam Speaker, looking forward, at the Cayman Islands Fire Service, the Ministry will complete the recruitment of a Chief Fire Officer as well as a Deputy Chief Fire Officer and conduct a strategic exercise to restructure and reorganize the department to better meet the vision and mission and support best practices, incorporating the feedback from the UK Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor. Madam Speaker, we intend to successfully resolve all outstanding aerodrome fire rescue compliance issues identified by the Civil Aviation Authority by the end of this year, and to equip the aerodrome and domestic services with replacement personal protection equipment. Madam Speaker, the Ministry will conduct recruitment of staff based on the results of the reorganization and restructuring exercise, as well as a human capital assessment of current establishment, ensuring value for money and succession planning. Plans are in the works to upgrade firefighting equipment for Grand Cayman, Cayman Brac, and Little Cayman per assessed needs and facilitate the necessary training in fire prevention, domestic and aerodrome, with the assistance of the Office of the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor for England and other resources. Facility improvements are also planned. The Ministry will replace fire vehicle bay doors for West Bay and Georgetown fire stations that were damaged during Hurricane Ivan, as well as upgrade radio equipment in conjunction with government's overall communication plan. The Frank Sound and Cayman Brac fire stations will receive upgrades to the air conditioning systems, and we will consolidate dispatch services. Madam Speaker, we plan to enhance communications between the London office and the Cayman Islands Government Central Communication Systems by leveraging the technology and systems integration opportunities. There is also a plan to increase the efficiency of the system currently in place for the application and processing of visas and passports for visitors and students, respectively. The Ministry of Home Affairs will also assist the Caymanian student population in the United Kingdom and Europe with job placement and other matters. In the Department of Community Rehabilitation, we will provide community-based supervision and risk assessment of lifers on parole and deliver empowerment services to assist offenders with preparation and reintegration into the general population. The Ministry will also secure additional human resources to meet the growing need by the courts for social inquiry and other reports, as well as the legal requirements of the conditional release law. Already underway at the Department of Computer Services is a complete commission review, and we will implement recommendations for further computer service department services, infrastructure, including outsourcing options. Our aim is to drive IT governance mechanism to streamline and make most efficient use of IT resources across government, improving service delivery to stakeholders and increasing value for money. Madam Speaker, as I said earlier, work on the phase 2 of the immigration policy reform is underway and is focusing on the work permit system, simplification of applications, accepting online applications, and one-stop shop for police clearance certificates when required for an application. The Immigration Department is working with the airlines to have the percentage of department passengers who are screened electronically increased to 90% in the coming months, when all airlines become capable of providing manifest data electronically. Consideration is also being given to enhancing fingerprinting requirements, inclusive of the collection and management of fingerprints in immigration legislation, which will significantly aid in effective border security. It is proposed that the fingerprinting process will be in a phased approach, starting with work permit holders. Again, Madam Speaker, speaking of Cuban migrants, Department of Immigration officials will form part of a delegation of government officials who will travel with us to Cuba in September, as I said, to meet with representatives from the Cuban government to discuss ways of improving the repatriation process and other associated matters. Madam Speaker, at the Department of Public Safety Communication, also known as the 911 system, the Ministry will upgrade electronic monitoring to new foil-resistant technology to better service needs of courts, police, and prison, while ensuring public safety and continue enhancements to national CCTV program. The Ministry will also facilitate rationalization of dispatch services, that is, amalgamate the service operated by the fire service. Hazard management. Cayman Islands is in the final stages of completing arrangements for a much-needed upgrade of the national telecommunications infrastructure and operating systems. This will allow for greater portability, coverage, use, and expanded lifespan of the entire network. The national telecommunications system supports all government agencies, inclusive of public safety and security agents. At Her Majesty's Cayman Islands Prison Service, the Ministry will increase the number of prisoners participating in the release on temporary license scheme so that they can have an opportunity to participate in community-based work and gain valuable skills required for successful re-entry to society. We will also introduce a structured working day for prisoners whilst in custody as part of their overall core day. Madam Speaker, because security has been an issue at the prison, the Ministry will install upgraded fencing, security cameras with automated video alerting, and a link back to the national CCTV hub, along with estate repairs and upgrades to further enhance security and increase detection of contraband. We will also complete separate cells for juvenile offenders and work with the Ministry of Health and other mental health stakeholders to implement safe remand and secure facilities and appropriate treatment interventions for offenders suffering from mental illness and who have a dual diagnosis. Madam Speaker, the Ministry will provide ongoing training for prison personnel to support them in their role as rehabilitative agents, including but not limited to mental health awareness, de-escalation, risk of harm assessment, and mixed inmate group management. This coming year, the National Drug Council will bring the revised National Anti-Drug Strategy to Cabinet for approval, bringing programming and budgets in line with the plan and ensure proper implementation. There will be a review of the National Drug Council law for relevance, management, and operation, which includes mandatory collection of data. The Council will provide feedback to the Liquor License Law Review Committee with the goal of having dialogue to ensure the revised legislation is in line with the regional and international best practices. It will also develop CADIN, proposed policy or legislation for the need to manage prescription drugs, develop a curriculum for drug prevention and education programming, and conduct counselor training. At the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, Madam Speaker, we will reopen the East End and North Side police stations, and it's a pity that both the East End member and the North Side member are gone, and increase staffing to support policing in these districts and evaluate current estate needs and develop a plan to support them as well as future growth. Madam Speaker, the entire opposition seems to have abandoned the chamber, but both the members from East End and North Side were speaking about, particularly the member from East End, that the government is not responding to what they are requesting and what they are asking, and each of them have had three visits to Cabinet. Madam Speaker, as I think what I've just said has demonstrated, the government is listening and the government is doing whatever it can to respond to what we believe are legitimate concerns, not just of the members, but of those two communities. And so we have taken what I believe is a big decision to reopen both the East End and North Side police stations. Madam Speaker, in closing, might I just say that as our ultimate aim is the well-being of the public, we cannot compromise on these principles because the public is depending on us for the country's productivity, stability, and in very fundamental ways for its very survival. We must therefore all be active and committed partners in this process, because if we do not act now, we could all too easily slide into a social crisis. Certainly, at the very least, a high quality of life will ultimately elude us if we do not act, starting in this coming budget, to focus across the board on human development and security priorities. Madam Speaker, I believe that we have delivered a good, solid budget which will inspire confidence in the broader community, in investors, and in the international community. But that budget, Madam Speaker, and the numbers that are included in it underpin the policies and the programs and the projects of this administration. And so it is those plans, those programs, those projects, Madam Speaker, that are ultimately aimed at making life better for all who live and work here, and all who call these islands home. I believe, Madam Speaker, that we have a good, solid plan, that the future for Cayman is indeed bright. And I commend this budget to this Honorable House because I believe with all sincerity that these practical institutional changes we have proposed will make work between the ministry and its agencies more integrated and fruitful, and ultimately inure to the benefit of the people of these beloved Cayman Islands. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Appropriation July 2014 to June 2015, Bill 2014, be given a second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. The Appropriation July 2014 to June 2015, Bill 2014, has been given a second reading. I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, may I ask for a division?
Most certainly. Madam Clerk, please call a division. Madam Clerk, for the purposes of the division, we did receive formal apologies from the Deputy Premier and from the Leader of Opposition.
Honourable Premier.
Aye.
Honourable Tibbetts.
Aye.
Honourable Bodden.
Aye.
Honourable Panton.
Aye.
Honourable Archer.
Aye.
Honourable Rivers.
Aye.
Honourable Eden.
Aye.
Mr. Connolly.
Aye.
Mr. McTaggart.
Aye.
Mr. Hugh.
Aye.
Mr. Saku.
Aye.
Honourable Bush. Not here. Honourable Bernie. Mr. Bush, he's not here. Captain Eugene. Honourable Mr. Miller. Mr. McLean. Abstain. They're not here.
The result of the divisions are as follows: 11 ayes, 5 absentees. Madam Clerk. Let me repeat that again, please. The result of the divisions are as follows: 11 ayes, 6 absentees. I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I wish to thank all members of the House for persevering through this debate process, and especially thank those who have remained to the end this evening. Madam Speaker, it is my yes, Madam Speaker, I'm being reminded. I wish to thank your good self and the Honourable Deputy Speaker who stood in for a full week, all members of the staff of the Legislative Assembly, particularly the clerk and deputy clerks, for their work and assistance and guidance in getting us through this process. I think that the debate has gone very efficiently. We've managed to get through having all but one member speak in 5 days. I think we've done quite well. So, Madam Speaker, it is now my honor and my duty to adjourn the proceedings of this Legislative Assembly until the conclusion of Finance Committee. And to echo the Minister of Finance, Finance Committee will commence at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
The question is that this Honourable House stands adjourned until the conclusion of Finance Committee. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. Accordingly, the House now stand adjourned until the conclusion of Finance Committee, which is set to convene at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.